Hello, all of you, and welcome to Allied Health 101 First Lecture, a grand review of anatomy and physiology. First thing I wanted to say was hello. So here we are. I'm Carol, and Carol Hoffman, and I teach anatomy and physiology, and I'll be teaching the review this summer. So this is all very exciting because I want to see what you all remember. The first thing is, what is physiology and what is anatomy? And do you even remember that? So both of them, I want to stress, are concerned with function. And also the why, the evolutionary questions of why is it that way? I mean, how often do we look at the cadaver anatomy and think, I wonder why it's built that way. I wonder why evolutionarily that makes a better design than a different design. So all those things we'll be thinking about. Both anatomy and physiology, they focus on adaptation of the organism to its environment. Why does it do better? I mean, I always think the dolphin can, manage air and food through two different tunnels in the body. Now, we have to share one. We have a pharynx that shares both. And that could be problematic because you could choke. So why is it, that design exists the way it is? We'll be thinking about those things. Anatomy and physiology, both of them are comparative, and we're always comparing other organisms. And anatomy, though, is the one that emphasizes more structure. This is what it looks like. This is what it's named, and that's kind of what we do at Cabrillo, right? We do a lot of memorizing, and then we get to physio, and then we're emphasizing function. It's all very well to know what it looks like, but actually, what does it do? And that's the more fun stuff. I think once you know what it looks like, what does it do? So just more particular, here's someone doing a test. Maybe he's doing a VO2 max test. And when we're thinking about physio, we really want to know what's happening at the physical level. This guy's exercising on the machine. What's happening? What are the chemical processes that are happening in his body? Why is his heart rate elevated? Why is he breathing more heavily? So we're thinking of what goes on in the cell, what goes on in the tissue, what goes on in that organ, that all of a sudden this heart is working so much harder. So we're studying living organisms. We're studying living creatures, right? And we're measuring in vivo. And if you remember in physio, if you took it here, we're hooked up like this person is, and maybe we're breathing to see what our lung capacity is, and maybe we're squeezing a dynamometer to see what our force that we can create is, and along with that what the electrical activity is. So in general, we're measuring in vivo, in a living person. Very cool. Anatomy, on the other hand, emphasizes dissection, and this is such a pathetic picture of this poor cadaver with his legs out and arms out. We don't do that to ours. But we do emphasize dissection. We do look at cadavers, don't we, in anatomy, dead. So anatomy is going to emphasize structure, relationships between parts, and the function of it. Just I was saying, if we have one tube that's bringing in air and food, that's very interesting. But how does that work? How does that work that we don't end up with air in our stomach, in the esophagus, and food in the trachea, right? Those are those relationships between form and function. Anatomy also shows us what we can do. And that's very interesting. How can you flex something? How can you extend? What kind of movements can the human body make, which are amazing when you start looking at athletes, right, and what they can actually achieve with the body. So also in general in animals, when we think of animal anatomy, we're thinking of locomotion. Why do they move the way they do? What allows them to do that? What muscles are different that allows them to move like they do? They are feeding differently. How they forage matters. How they find food. If you have a mole in your garden, you know that those claws are the ones that are going to be able to dig a hole in your tomatoes. That's what I've got molds in my tomato bed, because it's an adaptation, an anatomical adaptation on that hand, which is amazing, that allows them to do that. They have to find food, they have to process food, even though it's my tomatoes. And then the whole process of reproduction, mating, pregnancy, lactation, all this is part of anatomy adaptations that are going to make that be specific and efficient and pretty perfect, actually. So in human physiology, going back to that a little bit, how do we know what we know today? And, that's major research that goes on. Animal studies are very important. They're key to our understanding. And we also have comparative studies. As I was saying, we're always thinking of comparative physiology of how different animals function. And that allows us universal questions. I mean, we study the ear and we see that an animal that swings from one tree to another has a very developed ear because they have to deal with balance. So this kind of comparison is very interesting to do with other animals. A&P in the 20th century is terrifically exciting. I keep moving myself out of the way because we're in a revolution of molecular biology. The more we learn about molecules, how they function, the more we learn about the physiology. The more we learn about DNA structure, that's going to be the genetics of disease, the genetics of how different organisms function. A lot of studies now with protein synthesis, the role of proteins. We haven't even begun to discover all the proteins that we have in our body. We don't even know which ones are there yet. So very important that is studied, and this biochemistry, metabolism, this gets very detailed, very interesting. And physiology really is the link between research and medicine. And I'm always fascinated by at the beginning of the year where we get our Nobel Prizes in medicine, and it always is something that we can recognize as physiologists, something, oh yeah, we've tried to understand that. And these Nobel Prizes in medicine are based on the physiology of these organisms. The Human Genome Project, of course, was gigantically important. It was completed in 2003. UCSC, which is our university right here, was a major contributor to that. And it's in our genes. Our genes are going to determine so much of medicine, really. So between proteins and genes and the understanding of that and our ability to be able to manipulate some of that and do tissue engineering, that is a remarkable feat of research today. So I think that still a lot of money is going into this research today, and in these next 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to learn a lot more about how the human body functions, and a lot more about the brain too, I think. So I'm going to stop this and put the next lecture, begin the next shorter lecture on the big ideas in anatomy and physiology. And let me close this now and start with that on the next mini lecture.